It would be an understatement to say that watching the Philadelphia Eagles offense was frustrating in their matchup with the Jets. Whether it was turnovers, drop passes, Brian Johnson calling 14 rushes with their running backs, or Jack Driscoll getting beat continually, nothing seemed to go right. There's a lot of heat on Brian Johnson right now, and while he played his part in the Eagles' struggles, a lot of people had a hand in this letdown. There's a lot to unpack, so let's jump into it. The first thing we'll start with is the Eagles' rushing attack. The Eagles, at their core, are a running team. Even with their low rush count on Sunday, they're still second in the NFL in rush attempts. So that begs the question, why did the Eagles only run 14 times with their running backs? And when they did, why were they so bad at it? Several factors led to this. When looking at the game on paper, the Jets were down their top 3 outside corners in the secondary, and their front 7 was almost fully healthy. The general consensus among fans and gamblers was that this would be an A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith type game. I don't recall seeing too many people saying Swift was about to go off, and they were right. When we get more in depth in the passing game, we'll see A.J. torching the Jets and Devontae running wide open on several others. I think it was quite obvious from the first drive that the plan was to rely on the passing game more, and considering the Eagles only averaged 2.2 yards per carry with their backs, the coaches probably recognized they may struggle running the ball, or at least have an easier time through the air. What they were doing, especially through the first half, was using quick, short passes as an extension of their running game. So, while DeAndre Swift only had 10 carries, he had 18 total touches when you include his targets, and 40 of his 58 yards came through the air. Much of those were schemed up for him. The Eagles faced 22 second down situations, 14 of which were between 7 to 12 yards to go. The average NFL rush rate in those situations last year was 34%. Teams just don't run that much when faced with second and long situations. The Eagles ran on 27% of those situations on Sunday. Now, the Eagles faced 31 first downs and only ran the ball on 11 of those first downs, including one quarterback run. The average NFL rate on 1st and 10 in 2022 was 52%, but the Eagles did not do well running on first down in this game. They averaged 2.5 yards a carry. In the first half, that number was negative 0.4. Meanwhile, in the first half, on 11 first down dropbacks, the Eagles completed 7 passes versus 2 incompletions, which we'll talk about later, to go along with 2 scrambles. They averaged 5 yards per play on those dropbacks. Utilizing their quick passing game kept them ahead of the sticks much better than running did. I do think the Eagles should have run the ball more on first down, if for nothing else than to keep the defense honest, but with the way the Birds were rushing on Sunday, I'm only talking 3 to 4 carries more. The Eagles are a heavy RPO team by design, and with that comes situations where the run-pass balance can get skewed based on what the defense or quarterback decides to do. The Eagles ran 5 non-quarterback designed run RPOs in the first half. All 5 resulted in passes. They ran 4 in the second half. All 4 resulted in runs. In my eyes, RPOs are running plays first that have the option for a quick pass if the defense wants to sell out against the run. Take this play for example. It's an RPO, but the defense is focused on stopping the run. They have a numbers advantage with 7 defenders against 6 blockers. Jalen makes the correct read to throw and does a good job getting the ball over the free defender. The ball is a little high, but this is a pass that should be caught for a good gain. Sometimes though, the defense lets you have both options in an RPO. Take this play. I don't recall seeing this RPO variation from the Eagles before. First of all, this is a great formation. They align AJ, OZ, and Goddard in a tight bunch while putting Swift to the strong side of the formation. They've created a dirty quad bunch look. A dirty bunch would be a bunch where you have 3 receiving threats all within about 5 yards of each other, but one of those receiving threats is in the backfield. It creates a bunch look and allows the offense to run many of their same bunch concepts, just not from a traditional look. By having a dirty quad bunch, the Eagles can now flood one side of the field with receiving threats. If the defense wants to overload that side of the ball, then that would leave Devontae one-on-one to the other side. If they leave a safety over top the backside, there's advantages for the offense to the front side. This formation creates a lot of stress on the defense, and I hope to see the Eagles continue evolving the plays out of this look. The Eagles' design on this RPO creates a lot of horizontal stretch on the defense. The run is an outside zone, with the Eagles using a pin and pull adjustment that gets Kelsey leading the way. The pass is a bubble to Goddard on the backside, which is a unique way to run a bubble. So the Eagles are using a run designed to hit outside to one side, or a pass designed to hit outside to the other side. That's a lot of space for the defense to cover. When I said the defense lets you have both options, here's what I mean. The defense aligns to the bunch in a way that gives the Eagles a lot of space to work with for the designed routes, and the Eagles have a numbers advantage to that side. With the defense playing with 2 safeties deep, the offense has a numbers advantage in the box. And when you consider the player that they are reading, the backside linebacker, is just sitting in place, he's further away from helping the run than he is to the pass. Jalen isn't wrong taking either option here. The bubble to Goddard results in a first down. I think this should have been handed off though, and I think the coaches agree. The next play, DeAndre Swift fumbles, and the Eagles don't get the ball until the next half. The second play out of halftime, the Eagles run the same play, but this time they hand it off to Swift, who ties his longest gain of the day at 9 yards. I think the coaches came out at halftime wanting to get the same look again, specifically to run the ball. Here's the thing with RPOs. Part of the decision making to run or not comes down to Jalen. I don't think Jalen was wrong in any of his run-pass decisions like we just saw, but sometimes a run is a better option for what the defense shows. Take this other play the Eagles ran. I haven't seen this one before either. It looks like a quarterback bash concept, where they read it like a zone option, but instead of the quarterback running to the read side, it's the running back, while the quarterback would run to the front side if he decided to keep it. It was an effective play for the Eagles last year, but this time, instead of pairing the bash concept with the front side run play, they have paired it with the flanker screen. Like the dirty quad bunch RPO we saw, this again creates tremendous horizontal stretch on the defense. And like we saw on that play, the Eagles have the numbers to utilize either option. They go with the run here, and it's their longest gain of the day on the ground. I'm not sure if the coaches wanted Jalen to hand off if either option worked, but this is the second time in the second half the Eagles hand off when both the run or pass were viable options. When you run a lot of RPOs, sometimes it leads to more passing than normal. But if the defense sells out to stop the run, why not take what they're giving you? The Eagles probably should have mixed in a few more dedicated runs, but RPOs are a foundation to the Eagles' offense. The passing option often sets up bigger running lanes for the offense, and vice versa. We just need to understand that sometimes it'll result in less rushes. Now, the main issue on Sunday is that the biggest chunk of their rushing yards came on 3 runs, all exotic play designs. We already looked at 2, here is the third. It's again that dirty quad bunch look, but this time they use Swift as the offset tight end and Boston Scott in the backfield. At the snap, they use Swift as eye candy, running a jet sweep action that draws the attention of the defenders to the play side where the Eagles are running a toss, another 9-yard gain. The Eagles gained 30 of their 32 total rushing yards with running backs on these 3 plays. These plays are fun, but in order to have a successful day on the ground, you can't rely on exotic designs 20 times a game. You have to be good with your base run designs, and the Eagles were not good executing those against the Jets. Let's take this play. It's the first drive of the game, and the Eagles have the ball on the 3-yard line. The Eagles get creative and use a tackle over formation. They are running either outside zone or mid zone, which is a close cousin of outside zone. I think it's mid zone based on the way Mailata is trying to widen the edge instead of sealing it. Of course, everyone wanted to blame Brian Johnson for having Boston Scott in the game instead of Swift, when the real issue is the whiffed block. Doesn't matter who your running back is when this happens. Earlier, the Eagles try a gap scheme run, a CT counterplay where Kelsey's kicking out the end with Mailata pulling around. The key block is Lane, who gets compressed back into the gap, and Kelsey, who lets his man fall inside of him on the kickout. Opeta also gets pushed back into the gap, and it goes nowhere. Later, the Eagles try to run inside zone to Mailata and Dickerson's side, but on the backside, Opeta is late comboing up to the linebacker, taking away the cutback. On the play side, AJ has to fill in, blocking the safety rotating down, but instead of engaging and locking onto the block, he goes for the big hit, and the safety recovers and ends up making the tackle. Here's a tight zone run. Kelsey and Dickerson do a good job displacing the defensive tackle, though Dickerson doesn't come off the block to get to the linebacker, so Gainwell can't run frontside. Opeta's body position needs to be further inside to prevent Quinnen Williams from working his way back into the gap and ending the play. Again, on the 3-yard line, the Eagles run another gap scheme run. Opeta and Driscoll don't create any movement on their double team, and Driscoll can't get up to the linebacker, while Mailata isn't able to create any daylight with his kickout, forcing Swift to spill the run to an unblocked defender. On the drive after the 9-yard run on the dirty quad bunch RPO, the Eagles try it again, this time widening the bunch to try to create a more horizontal stretch. But by the 3rd time, it was clear the Jets went with a check to this look. They play quarters and widen the linebacker out to force the run. Though the defense technically has a numbers disadvantage in the box, the quarters coverage allows them to play with the 5.5-man box, as the safety is going to align closer and come down hard on the run. The Jets slant the defensive lineman opposite of the running back inside, which allows the linebacker to play fast and outrun the backside cutoff block. Mailata is overzealous, trying to get to the edge, which lets the end run inside untouched, forcing Kelsey to clean up the unblocked defender instead of working to the second level. Devontae needs to recognize that this safety is 10 yards off the ball and have more urgency getting inside to block. Later, the Eagles run their outside zone variation again, but this time Mailata does a good job staying patient and is able to watch the defensive end inside. But Swift decides to bounce this run instead of taking the available alley. Here was the Eagles' best foundational run play. It was their tight zone week that I've covered in a previous video. This is their best run play. The Eagles run it a little bit differently this time. Instead of using the tight end to block, they release him to block the corner and read the end. This gives Jalen a lead blocker if the end crashes down. But regardless, this play lets the Eagles run behind their two best run blocking offensive linemen. And unsurprisingly, they have a ton of space to run. This brings me to my next point. The Eagles' design and emphasis in their run game was surprising to me. The Eagles' best run plays generally involve a combination of Dickerson and Mailata at the point of attack. Based on how many times the Eagles used plays designed to run to Driscoll and Opeta's side, makes me believe the game plan was to run to that side leading into the game. Granted, the game plan was taking into account that Lane wouldn't be hurt, but I don't think that should have been the game plan to start with. Mailata and Dickerson are such a dominant force in the running game that the Eagles' rushing attack should revolve around them week to week. Not adjusting to Lane being out makes it even worse. The easy thing to do is point at Brian Johnson and say, why did you come into the game with this rushing plan? Or why didn't you make any adjustments after Lane got hurt? But there is a discussion we need to have about how coaching staffs work in football. The title of offensive or defensive coordinator is a broad term, and the responsibilities of them vary widely from team to team. The Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator has much less influence and control as, say, Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. In Philadelphia, the Eagles run game coordinator is Jeff Stoutland. He has a huge influence on the running game every week. He was responsible for diagnosing any mismatches and designing the rushing game plan each week. And he's also responsible for communicating and collaborating with the offensive coordinator during the game to make adjustments. I don't think the Eagles came into this game with their best plan for the ground attack, and that falls on Stout even more so than Brian Johnson. I know that's taboo to say, but Stout is human. He's not going to be perfect in every decision he makes, and that's okay. Now, in terms of total runs, that falls more on Brian Johnson as he is the play caller. But again, this is a discussion on how coaching staffs work. Nick Sirianni was brought here because of his offensive mind. This is his offense. The Eagles are running 80 to 90% of the same play designs they ran last year, even under a new coordinator. This is why Sirianni took responsibility for play design for a few plays in his recent press conference. He has alluded during the offseason that while he won't be calling plays, the structure and design of the offense still goes through him. When the Eagles came into this game with a pass-heavy approach, it wasn't Brian Johnson in a corner office devising the strategy all by himself. Nick Sirianni plays a large role in game planning, scripting, and deciding which calls go on the play sheet each week. Andy Reid isn't the play caller in Kansas City, and Bill Belichick doesn't call plays on defense in New England, but you'd be crazy to think that they don't have control over their weekly game plans. You'd also be crazy to think that Nick Sirianni doesn't have a large influence in the weekly game plan, especially with the first-year offensive coordinator calling plays. So if you're gonna go on unhinged rants about Brian Johnson not running the ball more, make sure to include Nick Sirianni in that discussion as well. Ultimately, the players didn't execute whatever the game plan was, and that's on them at the end of the day. They are the ones on the field. They have to make the plays no matter what the game plan is. The greatest game plan does not matter if you're gonna get your ass kicked. I showed plays that were ended due to failures of Mailata, Dickerson, Kelsey, Opeta, Driscoll, Lane, and Swift. Everyone, from top to bottom, didn't execute, and that is on players to go out there and do their job as well. I personally don't take too much issue with the run-pass ratio based on how we were running the ball, and to be honest, I'm not sure why people are acting like this is unprecedented or there's some mythical rushing number that we need to get to with our backs. Here are the games from last year where we ran the ball with running backs less than 20 times a game. There were 8 total, and some standouts were the Steelers game, where we gave our backs 17 carries despite leading big almost the entire game and averaging 6 yards per carry. Or the New Orleans game, where we gave the backs 14 carries despite rushing for 4.8 yards a carry and playing with a backup quarterback. We didn't call for Steichen's head then, so people should calm down about Brian Johnson. I know the team's red zone efficiency isn't the same as last year currently, but the Eagles are still averaging the same number of yards and 1 less point a game through 6 weeks. People have said this offense doesn't feel in sync this year. Go back and watch the second half of the Cowboys game in week 6, or the entire Arizona Cardinals game in week 5. People have fond memories of the Vikings game last year, but that was more of a defensive domination than anything, as the Eagles got shut out in the second half. The Eagles scored 24 points in the second quarter against the Carson Wentz-led Commanders and were held scoreless in the other 3 quarters. That's just the first 6 weeks of last year. Most people are just looking at the Eagles' 2022 season through rose-colored glasses. It's human nature, but if you're convincing yourself that the Eagles' offense was always running smooth last season, you're just misremembering what happened. Regardless, the Eagles still had 348 yards of offense. They were moving the ball. They just have to hold on to it. Now on to the passing game. I'm gonna break this into 2 parts because the play designs were awesome and deserve their attention, but also the handling of Lane's injury has to be talked about in its own light. I discussed the Eagles' use of quick passes to substitute in the running game, so let's take a look at that. The Eagles were creative in how they went about this. The Eagles used pony personnel here, where they have have both Boston Scott and DeAndre Swift on the field, but they line up Swift as the number 3 receiver in a trips formation and run a bubble RPO with him to get him a touch in space. I'd much prefer to see a greater percentage of touches in space versus up the back of linemen not able to create any movement. The Eagles again use their pony personnel to get a wide open player for an easy first down. They dress up this play by having A.J. Brown orbit motion to the other side of the field while running essentially a new age triple option. They can either hand it to Swift, keep with Jalen, or throw to Boston Scott, running to the flat. Devontae Smith works down the line to create a rub on any potential defenders, but nobody follows Scott to the flat. The Eagles also use different skill position players in the backfield. They put Devontae in the backfield and get him matched up on a linebacker while running an option route. They run a 4 verts concept behind him, and unless they have an alert to take a one-on-one with AJ or some matchup they like, they're pretty much running those routes as clear outs to get their playmakers in space. They do this again with Devontae and once with Swift, but he fumbled the ball. Obviously, he needs to hold on to the ball. I'm not going to touch on the red zone too much in this game, as I'll have a video discussing specifically that at the end of the week, but they were 2 for 3 in the red zone this week, which puts them at their season average from last year. And this play was a nice design. They motion AJ in to create a dirty bunch, which forces the Jets to go to a bunch check. They use a box check here, which I discussed in last week's video. The Eagles use AJ to move the defender responsible for the inside and underneath zone of the box to open up space for Swift. Jalen gets hit on the throw, and it's a bit behind Swift, but he comes up with a crazy catch. The Eagles, of course, utilized a number of their other quick pass game concepts, but there's one more play that I want to touch on. I mentioned there were 2 first half incompletions on first down passes. Here's one. On the 4th play of the game, we again see pony personnel, and they use Scott as an escort on a swing screen to Swift. But on the backside, we have Devontae one-on-one with the backup corner who's pressed up on him. Again, this was the matchup everyone wanted coming into the game. Our guy just didn't win this play, but the Eagles showed right away that they wanted to find creative ways to get Swift in space. Coming into week 6, the Jets ran the highest percentage of quarters coverage in the NFL. They want to keep a cap on everything and influence throws short. So the Eagles called a lot of plays to get guys in space with blockers in front or one-on-one matchups with linebackers. But they also designed good plays to take advantage of quarters rules to attack intermediate and deep areas. One of their favorite ways to attack the intermediate area was by manipulating the middle linebacker. In quarters, the middle linebacker plays the middle hook, usually drops back and patrols the middle of the field, looking for routes coming across the middle, unless there's a third receiver to his side, including a running back releasing into a route and works to that side of the field. On this play, the Eagles come out in empty, forcing the linebacker to honor the trip side. They chip and release to the flat with Swift to move the flat defender out of the way to create a huge void for AJ. Getting AJ the ball in space is usually a good idea. This same general principle applies when facing Tampa 2 defenses. The Eagles run the same play and get the same result. AJ wide open with space to work. Keep this principle of manipulating the middle linebacker in mind later. It's going to come up in an important moment. To attack deep, the Eagles relied on deep crossing routes to put a safety in conflict. This is the second first down incompletion of the first half. Here, the Eagles utilize play action and run their Y cross concept, though they use Devontae on the crossing route. Against quarters, they want to attack the backside safety. If he stays over top to help the corner bracket the deep route, then the cross comes open. If the safety covers down on the crossing route, then it leaves the corner one-on-one with AJ, which is what we see here. The Eagles use a condensed formation and then widen AJ out on his release, giving him inside leverage. AJ probably isn't expecting the ball here and slows down on his route, but knowing Jalen will throw it up even if he's double covered, he's got to be ready. He makes up for it with his big catch and run we showed already a few plays later, but when these plays are there, you have to make them. This isn't the first time we've seen AJ taking it easy on a route. AJ is playing at a top 5 level at wide receiver, and he is the catalyst of this passing attack. But he is a captain, and with that comes bigger responsibility than just making plays. He is a leader of the team, and he has to set the tone for everyone else, and that includes attention to the small details. The Eagles run this play later in the game, and again miss a big opportunity. This time the Eagles run a concept called Yankee. Devontae is still running a crossing route, but this time AJ runs a deep post. The principle is the same as Y cross. This time the safety stays over top of the post, and Devontae is wide open, but Jalen checks down. Jalen played really well for most of the game, especially when accounting for the pressure he was dealing with from the right side of the line all afternoon. Time and again, he kept the Eagles on schedule, despite getting little out of the running game, several drop passes that would have gone for big gains, a couple of unfortunate turnovers out of his control, and constant pressure from the right side of the line. But I think that pressure started taking its toll in the second half. In addition to the crossing route he didn't pull the trigger on, he started missing reads or getting skittish in the pocket. On this play, the Eagles are running a curl flat concept, which is made to attack single single high coverages like we see here. AJ is open on this curl, but he doesn't pull the trigger. In the second half, in order to help stop AJ Brown from running wild all over them, the Jets began relying more on cover 6 and cover 8, which meant they would play cover 2 on AJ's side, which keeps the safety over top of him while keeping 2 to 3 defenders underneath him. They would play quarters on the other side. The Eagles dialed up a play to counter this. They pretty much ran a Yankee concept that we just saw, but had Davante running the deep post from the slot, while AJ ran a dig to the other side that occupied the safety. There was a ton of open space for Davante, and this should have been a big play, but the problem is, the Eagles didn't provide help for Driscoll. They sort of did, as the simple alignments of Gainwell, Goddard, and AJ make them threats to chip the end, and that's something the end has to think about, but ultimately, nobody does. I still think Jalen could have gotten this ball off, but the pressure he was facing all game is now in the back of his mind. Notice how he pulls his shoulder and ball down, like he's feeling somebody about to hit him. He does get hit, but if he had started his throwing motion at the time he pulled the ball down to evade a pass rusher, he would have gotten this ball off in time with Davante already starting his break. When you see stats about quarterback time to throw and think tenths of a second don't matter in the pocket, this is a perfect example of why it does. The pass protection isn't good, but if Jalen played on time, this is a big play. Now, the coaching staff deserves some blame here too. Sirianni mentioned that he takes the blame for the play design here. The overall design is fine. Great, actually, when you consider that they got exactly what they wanted out of the coverage. But when Lane is out of the game, the design has to change. Someone has to chip the end before releasing, whether that's Goddard or Gainwell. That's something that needs to be adjusted during the game, and that's on Sirianni and Johnson for not getting that taken care of before running this play. One last thing about this play, notice how Jalen audibles at the line and moves people around. This is part of why the running back carry noise is mostly just noise. This is 1st and 10, and very well could have been a run play called, but Jalen saw a coverage he wanted and checked. When you see a look like that, you make that check. Big plays are hard to come by in the NFL. Keep this play design in mind, because it matters for the last play of the game. Again, on an important 3rd down, we see that pressure showing up. While this is a tight pocket, these are pockets you have to work in when playing in the NFL. The Eagles have had the luxury of having a great offensive line for all of Jalen's career, but he has to learn to play in these. He has also had the benefit of being able to use his legs to get himself out of these situations his entire life, so he has a habit of running. But as he gets older, he's gonna have to rely more on his pocket presence and playing on time. When we look at the pass concept, it's using that principle of attacking the drop of the middle linebacker that we saw before, but this time in a different way. Instead of attacking from the backside, AJ starts on the side with the 3 receiving threats. The Eagles run a mesh concept, which is good if the Jets are in man coverage, but AJ's over the ball route attacks the soft spot against zone. While the middle linebacker widens to the side of the 3 receiving threats, AJ's moving back across him to the spot he just vacated. Though they get to it a different way, this is the same concept and principle on the play the Eagles used against the Commanders to convert a huge 3rd and 8. Notice the areas these routes occupy when they develop, and compared to this play against the Jets. This is a tight window, but the linebacker's momentum is moving one way while AJ is moving the other. A low throw on time, and the linebacker has no time to react. Jalen has to step up and make this throw. Instead, he scrambles into a sack, and the Eagles miss a costly field goal, which certainly changed how they treated the drive that Jalen threw the last interception on. Jalen has to make a better decision on that play regardless. Either get it to AJ, who is open with the flat defender playing the inside curl, or eat a sack. Either way, you can't turn the ball over. Now for the last play of the game. There's lots of talk that it was designed to go to Davante, but it's not. This was a play for AJ, and it builds off the cover 6 beater that resulted in an interception from earlier. That wasn't the only time the Eagles ran that play. They just didn't get the same coverage as the play we looked at. But after showing that play several times, the Eagles run a changeup. This time, the Eagles provide Driscoll help with a chip from OZ before releasing to the flat. AJ runs a return route, faking a crossing route before breaking back outside. It's great to take advantage of cover 2 looks, as it attacks the area underneath the safety and above the corner. Look at the play from earlier. A return route here leaves AJ wide open. But the problem is the Jets are running cover 3 buzz and using the middle safety to bracket AJ inside, with the corner bracketing him outside. I can't confirm, but the linebacker looks like he's working to provide underneath support on AJ as well. Jalen needs to recognize the rotation and space of the defense. They're hinting at it pre-snap, as there's a lot of green grass behind the safety that is going to buzz down, as he's only playing 8 yards off the ball. If Jalen gets his eyes to the backside post quicker, this is a big play and potentially a game-winning one. But by drifting and waiting, Davante gets too deep and has to come back to the throw. It's unfortunate, but it's probably a look Jalen has not seen before and one he can learn from. I really like the play designs and concepts they decided to use in the passing game coming in. And if Lane is in, they likely connect on several of those deep shots. But that's not what happened, and it took them too long to adjust. Driscoll started playing on the 11th play of the first drive, and though he was giving up pressures early, the Eagles were getting the ball out quick, and none of his pressures had caused any overly negative plays. Still, having 2 backup offensive linemen movement affects every aspect of your game. On this 3rd and 8, the Eagles call a screen to Goddard at the perfect time. The Jets are blitzing 4 guys to one side, and the Eagles run a screen right behind it. The problem is, Opeta takes a bad angle to get to the dropping defensive lineman. Compare his angle with Kelsey and Dickerson. He can't get there in time, and Goddard gets the ball knocked out, leading to an interception. If Opeta makes this block, Goddard has a lot of room in front of him, with a couple of bodyguards leading the way. The Eagles came out in the second half and still ran a fair amount of quick pass plays, from screens to RPOs and other quick game, but they also wanted to get more aggressive taking shots after getting a feel for how the Jets were going to play them. The plays were there, protection wasn't. The Eagles were moving the ball until a penalty and then sack allowed by Opeta and Driscoll put them in 3rd and 23. The Eagles went one more drive without providing help, and it resulted in a pressure that forced Jalen to scramble and ended in an incomplete pass. The next drive, the Eagles did some things to help mitigate the pressure Driscoll was allowing. They ran a quarterback draw on one play, while providing help in the form of a chip. That gave Jalen more time, and he has options he could have taken, but he scrambles around and finds an open Devontae. But 2 plays later, they don't help him, and it ends in an interception. It was after this interception that the Eagles went into full-on help mode, providing some type of assistance to Driscoll on 9 of the remaining 13 pass plays. I've never seen a team help a player every play. Maybe some has, but that just doesn't happen. It really hampers the offense to have to do that. But the Eagles needed to start helping Driscoll earlier, as his protection ultimately caused game-changing plays and appeared to have an impact on Jalen's process in the pocket. I think this was the coach's biggest failures in this game, not the running the ball issue. In fact, having 2 backup offensive linemen, especially on one side of the line, makes it really difficult to run the ball, as you can't really hide them in the run game. If you have a good offensive line overall, I think you can make a solid argument it's easier to hide those bad linemen in pass protection than in the run game. Once the Eagles started providing help to Driscoll, Jalen had a lot of clean pockets to work with. This falls on Sirianni, as play design is on him, and he didn't adjust the details of the designs early enough, and Johnson for not getting into plays and formations to hide Driscoll quicker, and really on both of them for not communicating this together faster. At the end of the day, this loss falls on several people on the offensive side of the ball. Brian Johnson is getting the brunt of it now, but this loss is on him, as well as Sirianni, Stout, several members of the offensive line, Swift for the fumble, Devontae for 2 big drops, and Jalen for missing plays late in the game. But it's one game, and it's the regular season. This happens to good teams every year. Take a look at the contending teams this year. The Super Bowl champions lost to a 4-win Colts team last year. The runner-up needed a come-from-behind win to beat that same team by 1. Go back every year, and you will find top teams losing to bottom feeders. But the good news is, having your weaknesses exposed early helps you devise game plans and strategies to negate those weaknesses later in the season. The loss sucked, especially when looking at the upcoming schedule, but the sky is not falling. Brian Johnson isn't the worst offensive coordinator in the world, and the Eagles' offense will be just fine. Take a deep breath. Don't watch football next week, as the Dolphins are gonna run wild on our secondary that might be starting 3 practice squad players. And remember, there will be better days ahead for this offense.